I thought this could be a fun video. These are going to be narratives I disagree with, narratives that are out there that a lot of people will say that I actually think are untrue. That doesn't necessarily mean that these are narratives that everyone believes and I'm the one person who disagrees, just that these are narratives that I've heard that I think that are wrong, and popular meaning at least there's a good chunk of football fans that agree with these narratives, and so I'm going to disagree and explain why I do, so let's just get into it. First, and these are in no particular order, but Brady gets all the calls I guess Brady got all the calls, should be how I phrased it. And I put Brady there, but you could argue it's Mahomes gets all the calls, the Patriots get all the calls, whatever you want to say. The reality is I've always had a theory on this stuff, and I don't know exactly what the case is, but my theory on this has always been that you only talk about the bad calls that you remember. You only talk about the bad calls that stick in your brain. No one's done a study really on bad calls throughout a game and then go back and look at it. That's not really something that often happens. A great example of this is in that, infamous Rams-Saints game where there was the, obvious pass interference that for whatever reason wasn't called that could have let the Saints not guarantee a victory, but pretty much guarantee a victory, and that one ended up not being called. A lot of people forget that earlier in the fourth quarter, the Rams had a drive stall in the red zone, even though there was a blown face mask call. Goff got his face mask grabbed, but the refs didn't call it. That would have given them a first down and goal inside the 5-yard line, which maybe they don't score a touchdown, maybe they do, but there would have been a very good chance to score a touchdown. Instead, they settled for a field goal. So that's a great example, I think, of you only remember the call that that hurt the losing team. And so for someone like Brady or Mahomes, yes, they get bad calls that benefit them in games they win, and so you remember those, but you tend to not remember the bad calls that happen in games that they win. And since Patriots and Mahomes and Brady are the guys who win a lot, that tends to be the reason why, in my opinion, why they have the reputation of being the guys who get all the calls, whereas maybe bad teams like the Browns and Lions have reputation of being a team that never gets the calls. I think is at least in part because of the fact that they tend to lose those said games, and then the calls just stick in your brain a little bit more. I think that's part of it. And also, there's been studies, like someone did do a study on pass interference penalties, and Brady gets actually very few compared to how often he gets hit. So that also leads me to believe it's kind of a bit of a narrative thing, but maybe not actually true. Next up, Tua got carried by his team is definitely a narrative that is out there. And listen, having Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill definitely is going to help you. But I think Tua was legitimately good on top of that last year. I don't believe that he got carried by his team or that any quarterback would have been good in that situation. And a great reason, counter argument for why, if anyone says that, a great counter argument I would give is that Teddy Bridgewater is, we considered a good backup quarterback and probably a top 32 quarterback in the league prior to last year, and he didn't look great when he came in there in relief. Again, maybe if he had a full training camp and all that, he could have looked better, but still, it's not like anyone could come in and be successful because multiple quarterbacks came in and weren't very successful in that situation. Also, Josh Allen is a playoff choker. This kind of happened after the last loss, and listen, I kind of get it. You are in a situation now where only one conference championship, despite having very good teams year after year. That conference championship that got blown out, and they got blown out against Cincinnati. But I don't really think it's a Josh Allen issue. In fact, Josh Allen has had some great playoff moments as well against the Patriots and against the Chiefs in that 13-second game were prime examples of him absolutely going off. I think you could maybe argue the Bills are playoff chokers, but I think Josh Allen, it's been like most quarterbacks where I would actually say he's been above average in the postseason given how he typically plays. But yes, he's had his down moments. He's played in enough playoff games where you should expect some down moments, but he's had the high highs as well. Next up, Lamar can't beat the blitz is something I've heard a lot. Here, it's somewhat true. The reality is the Ravens haven't been great. We all remember that cover zero game, the Brian Flores cover zero game where they were able to upset the Ravens by basically playing cover zero game after game after game. For Lamar, it's true that when you play cover zero or when you have a blitz, his numbers are worse. That is true. I think there's a reason for it, though, and I don't think it's a Lamar issue. I think it's a receiver issue. The reality is they don't have guys who can take advantage of those situations. Well, they don't have someone like Marquise Brown was not great at when he's one-on-one winning down the field and getting touchdowns that way. That just wasn't something that was happening. So teams could blitz Lamar more, and I think that he didn't have places to throw the football. I think that now that he has a better receiving core, you might see the people try to blitz him and have it actually really heavily backfire. I don't think it's a Lamar issue. I think it's a Ravens issue against man coverage in general. Another narrative that I think I disagree with is the media talks about Mahomes too much. This is something that, people love to say, oh, I like Mahomes fine, but the media just goes crazy over him. I think that's what the media should be doing. I think that, listen, I don't know if I count as the media or not as someone with a small YouTube channel, but, relatively small. I mean, depends on who you ask, I'm not somebody who's anybody, but, I like to talk about Mahomes and how great he is because I cover the NFL for a living, and I like to see interesting things, and every time I watch Mahomes, something interesting happens. He's electric to watch. And yes, when someone does something for year after year after year, it does start to wear off a little bit. And there are some, funny moments, right? Like the Chris Collinsworth talking about, that play is the greatest play I've ever seen when the ball just like slipped out of his hands. That was like what on earth are you talking about? There's some of that. There is. I'm not going to say there isn't. And that part is funny. But at the same time, you could do the flip side and say people talk about how, like, oh, who is the best player in football right now? Is it Mahomes? Is it Burrow? Part of that is just like, that's a good conversation to get clicks and all that stuff. But the reality is, if anything, a lot of people, again, depends on who you define as media. If you watch like the Fox Sports stuff and all that stuff, sometimes they don't give Mahomes enough credit more than anything. So I don't know. He's the face of the NFL. He is the LeBron James now of this league at this point. He should be the one dominating the conversation, in my opinion. Next up, the Bucs beat the Chiefs due to O-line injuries. This is something that definitely got talked about a lot with the Chiefs missing multiple tackles, which is, tough because you only have two of them, right? And I'm not trying to sit here and say that the O-line injuries didn't have a factor. Listen, injuries is part of the game, and, that they were banged up. There's no denying that hurt the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but I don't think it killed the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I think there were other ways they could have still found ways to have success in that game. For one thing, they could have helped out their tackles. They basically had no one chipping that entire game. So it wasn't just due to the injuries, because why didn't you help them out? Also worth mentioning, well, yes, Andrew Wiley was playing in that game, who was a backup that year, who was actually a guard, who then shifted over to tackle. They ended up keeping him as their tackle for multiple other years, and he ended up having a really good Super Bowl against the Eagles, and now got $7 million a year. He's a fine player. He's not a great tackle or anything, but it's not like they had some depth that year. Don't get me wrong, the Mike Remmers thing was not good. It was a disaster. He had a terrible game, but they should have helped him. So there were things the Chiefs could have done. Their defense could have been able to hold on, slow down the Buccaneers' offense at least to some degree in that game. And I think that I still feel like Mahomes made things more difficult on the tackles at times as well, bailing early on pockets, which he's even admitted that he did. So again, it's not to say that the O-line injuries didn't play a role, but I feel like some people kind of talk about that game as there's nothing the Chiefs could have done, which is just not true. The Chiefs could have found ways to make that game much more competitive, but it was really a disaster. All things considered, not just the Chiefs' offensive line. Every aspect, everyone on the Chiefs basically had a bad day in that one. And finally, don't want to spend forever on this one, but Brady got lucky to win 7 rings, which, listen, obviously it's a bit of an anomaly to win 7 rings. Even, the best quarterbacks before him won 4, right? So the fact that he was able to win nearly double what the other best have done, obviously there's going to be some breaks there. Having Bill Belichick, of course, helped him get to the 7 rings. Having, a good team in Tampa Bay helped him get to his 7th ring. Of course, that stuff is the case. You have to be on a good team to win a Super Bowl. You can't win it by yourself. There's no denying that. But I think, more so like people talking about the breaks that he's gotten, which is true. Again, it is true. He did get breaks along the way, but the reality is when you play in a lot of playoff games, some of them are going to be close, and some of those close games are going to, come down to the wire a little bit. Sure, you could look at the the Julian Edelman catch, the Malcolm Butler interception, the, Kyle Shanahan not running the ball once they were in field goal range. Like certain aspects you can definitely look towards. People throw into Adam Vinatieri stuff, which, I mean, he made field goals. That's what you're supposed to. He's a kicker. Like, that's not. Anyway, the reality is, if you're a quarterback and you're playing in Super Bowls, you're going to have your teammates make big plays at certain points. And if those Super Bowls are close, which they were, that isn't necessarily luck. Like, yeah, there's going to be big plays that go for you or mistakes that the opponents make that go against you. That's just part of it. And if you're the team that happens to win, then, then that's how it, then you remember, again, you remember the lucky things that went for the winning team, not necessarily the lucky things that went against the winning team. I mean, if you think about the Malcolm Butler interception, that Jaron Curse catch was one of the luckiest things you will ever see, a complete circus catch that allowed the Seahawks to get to the 1 yard line anyway. So again, there's always an element of luck to winning any Super Bowl. That's just the nature of the business. But was he just lucky to get the 7 rings, and was he just a good quarterback who happened to, have a 4-leaf clover on him at all times? I don't really think so. I think that, I think that's a bit overblown. But yeah, those are my narratives I disagree with. What are some narratives you disagree with? Or what do you think of? Do you agree with some of the narratives I disagreed with? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.